Okay, in this session we've got 4 speakers. It's a session on youth in the Indian diaspora, and the first speaker is Professor Bashabi Gupta, Youth in the Indian Diaspora, Cultural Identity Formulation of New Generation of PIOs in Europe. Then we'll have Dr. Sushmita Rajwa, PIO Youth and Cultural Identity, Impact of Indian Government Policies. Dr. Aditya Anshu. Is Dr. Aditya here? That's okay. The Evolution of Ethnic Identity, a case study of PIOs in Reunion. And then Professor Jaya Govender, a relational perspective for youth entrepreneurship and innovation in the Indian diaspora.
The paper that I am presenting today is Youth in Indian Diaspora, Cultural Identity Formulation of the New Generation of PIOs in Europe. The quest for self-identity amongst the youth in Indian diaspora from different parts of the world signifies their linkages with the original homeland that their ancestors had left many years ago. The paper focuses on the mechanisms through which the PIO youth construct their entropic, fluid, yet unique identities as they negotiate dualities of their lived reality. The youth experience multiplies worlds from the classrooms to the working spaces, leisure, and cultural activities. Though it is seen that generally the Indian diaspora have maintained their link to their homeland, that is India, they have also tried to maintain their regional identities and cultural practices. In effect, the diaspora is a microcosm of India itself. As the world comes closer through globalization and transnationalism processes, how does the youth in the PIO community? Next slide, please. This is the beginning of what we look at, how the globalization and transnationalism processes work amongst the youth in the PIO community. Next slide, please. And Europe is a particularly important part of what we understand. These are the research questions. How do the youth of Indian diaspora formulate their cultural identities and navigate their processes through such diverse worlds? What are the factors that shape their worldview? How do they view their own identity as yourself, as a part of the PIO in Europe? Which are the factors that influence them most? The rise of multiculturalism in European Union, please next slide, creates a visibility of young Indian diaspora amongst its growing population. A growing ethnic diversity has created new contexts and affected young people's identity and transitions to adulthood. The study focuses on how the youth in the Indian diaspora living in EU negotiate between their Indian and European aspects of their identity. Multiple research on youth in Indian diaspora has pointed to their multiple identities with references to fluidity and hybridity as a fusion of cultural influences which are not exclusively Indian or European per se. I argue here that the diasporic populations of youth who develop their own identities actually encompass also the national boundaries in which they are born or brought up in, and also the larger transnationalisms that are prevalent in Europe. So these are also fixed as well as movable categories. These processes involve inhabiting and negotiating distinct identifications simultaneously. In this sense, diasporic identities are associated with the idea of hybridities reflecting new forms of belongingness, what Bra describes as, in the context of UK, as British Asianness. These hybridities form the multiculturalism debate about how dominant and subordinate cultures are actually synthesized and used in everyday life. So, identity formulation involves reconciling the individual dispositions and the structural conditions amongst whom the youth are brought up. I argue here that each negotiation is thus presenting different categories and strategies of identity negotiations, exemplifying the constant and complex interplay between the individual agency and the social world in which they live. Much of the debate on youth in the Indian diaspora in the European Union is focused on how different boundaries of identity are integrated into the newer hybridities. Therefore, that they have a hyphenated multiple and plural identity is an established fact. Next slide, please. The EU, for example, represents a very interesting phenomena of space and society. It is very well known that the last estimates that MEA had provided in 2017, there were 2.83 million overseas Indians in the European Union, of whom 64.54% were concentrated in United Kingdom, followed by Netherlands at 8.31%, Italy 6.98%, Germany 6%, and France 3.85%. Though minuscule, these societies provide the maximum amount of diaspora earnings in these countries. Germany, for example, has initiated a lot of policies in which green cards were handed out to people from IT backgrounds to reinforce their own IT industry. These professionals have invested in these countries. Their children are growing up there, and the youth segment is what I'm talking of here. So what we understand is that EU, for example, is also a mixture, because Netherlands, the Indian Surinamese community who migrated from Suriname and settled in Netherlands, form a larger part of the Indians in Netherlands. So the Surinamese Hindustanis are a major community. Their associations, their societies, how they interact inform a lot about what Indians are supposed to be in Netherlands also. Along with this were the first transnational migrations, as was talked of in the last session, that people from the African continent, specifically Uganda, had moved off to the European Union, particularly UK, and then through them they spread out across the globe. It was not just a migration or a transnational migration in the first instance. It is also seen that people from Indian origin who are based in Belgium, say for Antwerp, they control about 70 to 80% of the diamond industry. So they are traders. What is specific here is, interestingly, that in the Eastern European areas, where earlier there was very little presence, now has a particularly important presence, because globalization processes which have demanded migration of larger number of skilled labor across the world, higher amounts of investment flowing into these areas, larger numbers of people who are actually living in these areas, along with workers, skilled workers in the transnational corporations who move into these areas and move out again. So located within this matrix is the new Indian diaspora of youths in Europe. One category which also needs to be mentioned are the students who are studying across European Union in different universities, at different institutes, and also at the different, particularly industries that are prevalent there. So next slide, please. The question therefore comes as, who am I? Am I a youth of the European Union? Do I belong to the country in which I was born or I am being brought up? Do I belong to my family, which may have a different kind of cultural leanings, which is not available always within the worlds that I inhabit? My classroom is a very much variegated classroom. I negotiate the classrooms with differences in language, in how I dress, what I eat, as well as how I mix. Next, what is the migration trajectory and history of my family? Is it a urbanized NRI, that is the non-resident skilled Indian who has migrated and with them have brought their children? Or do they have histories of persons of Indian origin? So this is why Europe is very interesting. Different countries, per se, have different kinds of migration histories. And those migration histories go into making their own cultural identities very strong. That is what the family gives to the child, the sense of the belonging. The first sense of belonging is to the family, then to the larger community. The moment the child steps out into the community world, the differences in the worlds become very obvious. So the sense of belongingness. Do I belong to my family? There's a very important question that comes here, that does my family belong to this place, or am I transient? In a lot of different places, many transitions are there in progress. Transnational workers will move from country to country, and IT workers specifically may be located in one location and may be working across the globe. So therefore, what is the sense of self, the family, and the community that the child develops? Next slide, please. So therefore, I'll finish 2 minutes. Thank you. So therefore, the multiple worlds, the classrooms, the working spaces, the leisure activities, the cultural activities, all of it converging, diverging, simultaneously, not so simultaneously, practices, what is it that the child does when the youth has to develop? What it does is, next slide please, it negotiates the multiple worlds through the hyphenated identities. The formal world of education is fixed, and therefore that provides an excellent backbone or a sort of structure for this youth to decide what do they want to do. One of the first conflicts that arise, or the complexes that arise, is the linguistic worlds. Many of the Indian diaspora parents insist on the children knowing their mother tongue or the language, which is definitely different from the language that is used in the in everywhere lives of those children. So the cultural worlds, Indian music, Western popular music, rap artists, they have a huge influence. Music per se is made in the society. The society is not made in the music. And this is where our Bollywood, Indian regional cinema, and the contrasts with different kinds of Hollywood and European language cinema also arise. Therefore, they formulate their own role models. Next slide, please. These are the three processes that I had identified as parts of their identity formation: strategies, negotiations, and techniques. What are the strategies that any individual youth identifies? How do they calculate or cultivate their navigations through different worlds that they inhabit? So therefore, the levels are multiple. For example, a very basic example is that of dressing. How do I dress? Sometimes it is not ordained that you will wear a jeans or Western clothes to some other place, like a place of worship or a temple. So therefore, the youth usually say that it is easier to negotiate these do's and don'ts. Problems come or conflicts arise when choices are made as per the host country's cultural formulations. So the techniques, the decisions, who do I go out with, what do I do? Next slide, please. Okay. So this was the last part, constructing the belongingness, combining, converging, diverging. It is, the general idea is that of being an Indian there, but what constructs as being an Indian is what is being debated upon. Is it the clothes? Is it the food? Is it the culture? Is it going to temples on particular days? Is it keeping fasts? Or is it participating willingly in the larger cultural milieu or the larger cultural social life that the family prefers to have? Simultaneously, the child is also participating in the host country's activities. For example, one of the readings that I had said that the child comes from school, does the homework, and goes on to the mandir to pray because it's Navratri. Navratri is not a holiday in UK or even across any of the European countries. So the festivities have to be continued along with the everyday lives of those youth. What does the youth choose? How do they then negotiate? Last slide, please. So what I say is that the emerging typologies combining, converging, and diverging illustrate complex transitions to adulthood, detailing how young people negotiated their agency and the structure in which they find themselves. It also provides insights into how young people adopted lifestyles and outlooks that developed between the different fields. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. I'd like to beg the indulgence of the three remaining speakers. Could you please spend only 10 minutes each? I know it's a tall order. It's difficult when you've prepared thoroughly and so on. But try and summarize the kernel of your ideas, just a summary of the main points that you'd like to make rather than a full presentation, because if we spend 10 minutes each, that'll take us to 3 o'clock. Okay? Thank you. So the next speaker is Dr. Sushmita Rajwar. She is currently working as an associate professor at the Center for African Studies, the School of International Studies at JNU. She has also worked as associate professor in the Department of Politics and Governance at the Central University of Kashmir, and as an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science, Maharaja Agrasen College at the University of Delhi. She has teaching experience for 13 years, and she completed her PhD from the Center for African Studies at JNU. She has diverse research interests: India-Africa relations, Indian diaspora in Africa, China in Africa, border disputes in African countries, and so on. And she has visited many universities and given many talks: the University of Malaya, Hankook University of Foreign Studies in Seoul, in Korea, Fudan University in Shanghai, Africa Institute in South Africa, in Pretoria, and also Michigan State University in the USA. So I'd like to call Professor Rajwar.
Thank you so much, Chair. Very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Sushmita, and today I am presenting my paper on PIO Youth and Cultural Identity, Impact of Indian Government's Policies. As the Chair has already pointed out, that we need to move on to the gist and the main points of the paper. What I would really like to talk about today is the Indian government's policies that have evolved in the recent years, especially in the last 2 decades, that have had a very welcoming, we can say, impact on the PIO youth and established a connect of the PIO youth with their cultural identity. So far as the policies go, I'll be talking about them in a brief manner. But firstly, I would like to start with how Indian government's policies have actually evolved. So the overall diaspora policy aimed at connecting the Indian diaspora from different parts of the world. But quite recently, the Indian government started connecting with, especially with the PIO youth as part of its overall Indian diaspora policy. This came from the response of the Indian diaspora itself and from the demands of the diaspora to have more connect with the PIO youth. So it rose from, especially from organizations like GOPIO, who made this demand to have specific policies for the PIO youth. Therefore, the change in the policies and therefore the change bringing about of the new and different initiatives by the MEA. So these policies have played an important role, as we see that our External Affairs Minister also pointed out that the identity in the last PBD in 2023, that the identity of diaspora is derived from how closely it is connected to its root. He especially talked about that how the PIO youth needs to be connected to their roots and how policies and events like PBD play a major role in that. And this is what we are talking about, I am talking about today, that how these policies have actually brought back that connect with the youth, and they have put the connect of the Indian government's policy towards their PIO youth in a specific way. But before talking about the specific policies, can you change the slide? The specific policies of the Indian government, we also need to see how PIO youth and cultural identity is connected. We need to explore and understand the complex ways in which young people of Indian origin, they navigate their cultural identity. So the cultural identity among youth of Indian origin refers to how young people have their ancestral roots in India, how they navigate through that connect, how they interpret it in their daily lives through the daily interactions they have amongst their family, society, peer groups, and friends, and how they express this cultural heritage in some form or the other, like organizing or forming some groups, associations, events within their lives abroad. So these youth, they often grow up balancing these values, traditions, and practices of their Indian heritage with those of the country they reside in. So for them, balancing the traditions and values of the Indian heritage is connected with the norms and expectations of their host country also. This often leads to dual or hybrid identity, which means they're drawing from both cultures to form a unique sense of self. They're trying to remain connected with their culture from the home nation, as well as to draw from the culture of their host nation. Within that, these four circles that we see are playing a very important role. Obviously, families play the most important role through which the youth navigate their identity, and they're able to interpret what it means to be Indian and what are the values associated with their own traditions and culture. Social interactions include all the interactions they have within the society amongst their friends and even ahead in their professional lives. Education plays a very important role, and even the policies of the Indian government, one of them is specifically focusing on education of those youth. So it again plays a very important role. But in the recent years, media has gained a lot of attention, especially the social media. And through the social media, because as we see, the PIO youth or any other youth in any part of the world is very well versed with the social media, and they spend a quality time on being connected with the social media. So with the help of social media groups, pages on Instagram, many PIO youth have been able to interpret that identity and to understand what it means for them to be part of that Indian identity, as well as to be within the host country's identity. Like to move forward, and let me just talk about briefly, can you just move, briefly about the policies of the specific policies of the Indian government on how they are trying to connect the PIO youth. The most important one and the most successful, we can say, one is the No India program, which was started in 2003, for mainly caters to the age group of 21 to 35 years, PIO youth. It was started for mainly for the PIO Girmita countries, but it also includes other PIO youth countries as well now. This is a program which offers an immersive experience to the youth through a comprehensive study tour. It includes a study tour that takes them to historical sites, cultural institutions, modern industries across all the Indian states. It is a well-planned visit of 3 weeks where around 35 to 40 youths are taken up in one batch. Until now, at least 2,500 youth have benefited through this policy. Even one KIP is supposed to be held from 15 to 4th October. So, these are just a few pictures of how and various places they've been. Even one of the states had launched its No India program, which was we need to go back. So another one is the Youth Pravasi Divas. I think we already know about what Pravasi Bharati Divas is, but just a youth segment added to it, to the whole original event, is something which has catered completely to the connection with the youth. So basically fostering connection with Indian youth to explore opportunities and collaborations in various areas like entrepreneurship, innovation is something which is again focused in this particular one. Bharat Ko Jano quiz is another one, which again, because in India we are very fond of taking exams on everything. So Bharat Ko Jano is also like an exam where they go through one quiz and then another set of quiz, but just to make them aware about the historical experiences, about the history and culture of India, which the winners, when they, the ones who win the quiz, are able to get a study tour of India, which is again sponsored by the MEA. Another one is the scholarship program for diaspora children. Again, this was started in 2006. This has been quite successful, as we see that in 2021, 150 students were given scholarships. Out of them, 127 opted for the BTech courses. So BTech course is quite sought after among the PIO youth itself, and they have been taking up, there have been participation of youth from different parts of the world. This is the data of the last one that was in 2021 from the MEA website. website. So number of youth who have taken up scholarships. So this is just an example of some of the specific policies that are catering to the needs of the PIO youth. But at the same time, we realize that why the government is focusing on youth is because of these key reasons, that they see youth as they are the ones who are going to represent the next generation, and it is the right time to connect with them in order to establish a long-term connection with India. So it is the need of the hour for India as well as for the PIO itself. Cultural preservation is something that is required because they are in different environments and there is a risk of losing connection to the Indian heritage. So specific policies might provide them that environment and that platform to engage with their own culture, language, traditions. And economic and social contributions are there, of course. The youth PBD is specifically for that. And the youth are more, adaptable to innovation, entrepreneurship. I'm just going fast. And there are other reasons also, like strengthening bilateral relations, which we understand. But all these policies have actually brought, if we see in the recent years, they have brought about a great impact on the cultural connectivity, identity of the youth. Why? Because this has strengthened their cultural identity. The youth have been able to express themselves much more freely, whether it is through one of the events or whether it is through social media or formation of certain small subgroups and associations in many parts of the world. They have been given educational opportunities, which is again an exposure to the home country as well as how the home country has developed over the years. They can get a view of how universities have come up and how different educational collaborations are available within India. It has also encouraged youth's participation in India's development because they are now they get much more chances to participate in that development through various policies like the No India program and through the PBD, youth PBD. So lastly, the most important impact, I think, is the global networks. The PIO youth have been able to think about establishing more global networks through the engagement and exchange of ideas with each other in each of these programs. So they have been able to think about the next level of engagement through establishing their own networks, which will be much more useful in the future. And therefore, the PIO youth will be able to express themselves in a much more clearer and in a much more substantial manner in the future, I think. So I will just stop here and we can continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shmita. Our next speaker, Dr. Aditya Anshu, currently serves as faculty of international relations at Abu Dhabi University. His domain expertise is diaspora and international studies. He has earned his Doctor of Philosophy from the prestigious School of International Studies at JNU. He doesn't want me to say too much more about him,
yes.
Due to time and humility. Yes. But he's an eminent scholar, so Dr. Anshu, welcome.
First of all, I would like to thank GOPIO International and my supervisor, Professor Ajay Dubey, for pushing me to the limits and asking me to come over here and present. So I'm really blessed and privileged to be his student. The another reason is because my work area is La Réunion. I have done my PhD on La Réunion, and I can proudly and humbly claim that very few people from India has done PhD on this topic. So I am one of them. I'll start my presentation today where Professor Ajay Dubey took us in the very first session, saying that we have two categories of diaspora. One is lost and another is dormant. So the reunion diaspora or the reunion people of Indian origin are both. They are lost and they are dormant. But I would also like to add that they were not very caste-rich diaspora. So that is one of the reasons that they were ignored initially. But they have this long feeling of revival through traditional, through civil identity, socio-cultural identity, and they want to connect. So for just a brief introduction to Reunion, it's a beautiful, diverse island east of Madagascar and not very far from Mauritius, almost 175 kilometers. Yet it's very different because it's a completely French territory where you have French laws, governed by the French laws. The food is French. The language is mostly French. However, there have been revival. And it's exactly 5,787 kilometers from where we are sitting. So it's quite far. Mostly, or I would say majorly, it's a Catholic country, and minorly, yes, there are other religions that are coming up. So this will be the agenda. I will be basically talking about the ethnic identity and how reunion has been shaped in last 200 years, some demographics, factors that influence the reunion and the identity of the people of Indian origin there, and what has been the impact of globalization, and then how PIOs help themselves to maintain their identity. Of course, followed by some Q&A. So island is very rich in culture with Indian ethnicity people leading the race. Then you have Chinese, and then you have French. The census is banned on the island, so we don't have the exact number, but approximately there are 900,000 in total population of the island. Majority of the Indian population came from southern India, and popularly they are known as Malabaris there. The heritage reflects, even though they were disconnected from the mainland India, even though they went through the French assimilation policy, but you can still see customs, language, and tradition as their identity there. Though there have been many ethnic identities on the island, but it has tried to maintain a multicultural identity with the Chinese, Indian, and French living together. Migration pattern can be traced back to the 19th century, which has led to today's settlement. So the definition of the ethnic identity, as you can see on the screen for the Reunion Island, shares a cultural and historical social background that delineates the distinctive groups. And the elements such as language, tradition, and ancestry plays a very important role. So you can say La Reunion is a melting pot of cultures of African, Indian, European, and Asian heritage. Now, if you see the historical overview of PIOs of ethnic identity in La Reunion, three things we can trace back to. One is the colonial history, two is the migration pattern, and third one is the cultural influence. When we talk of the colonial history, most of the Indians that were transported way back as indentured labor were basically transported from the southern India, right? And they have their own dynamics over there because they had to merge with the new population. But as Professor Dubey again quoted that we were very good in the agriculture's background, so we helped the French there to work in the coffee plantation and sugar plantation as well. So this is how it went. The migration pattern has impacted the demographics, especially the community formation on the island. History was impacted, altered. So when we talk of a migration pattern, we also have to think of the early 20th century when the Muslim migrants from Gujarat, the Bohra community, landed there. And the first mosque of entire France was built in Reunion Island in 1909. And Indians have helped in it. So Indians have helped in producing a multicultural society in Reunion Island. So then you have a culture. In theory of culture, culture is permanent yet dynamic, so which is passed from one generation to another. French assimilation policy impacted the Indian community there, the PIOs, but PIOs have maintained a good identity, cultural identity mixed with the religious identity, because initially they were not allowed to even build a temple, so they used to build a small temple behind their courtyard. So it always said in the Reunion that privately, socially you are a Catholic and privately you are a Hindu. So I don't want to go into the religious debate, but this is how it worked. Now we can see many mandir, which even I don't see in India, to be very frank, like Draupadi's mandir, right? So it is there, Diwali, Holi, it is coming up. Now, colonialism, I think colonialism has led to some of the indirect benefits, such as it has helped the diverse cultural thread into one island's identity. It has woven the different diverse ethnic group together, forming a very vibrant cultural idea on the island, a relationship that continues to evolve. So whenever I used to go to, for my field visit, I was there on the island, the food was the mix of French and Indian. The language was a mix of French and Indian. So it was very interesting to visit any Indian reunionee's house, and they were very generous, very hospitable, that they could help you to all the extent, and then they could share the entire journey. So when we talk of the demographics of the island, significant population of the Reunion Island has an Indian ancestry. Now legend says that 20 women were imported from Goa in early 17th, 18th century, and they are considered to be the great-great-grandmother of the island, because all of them, they trace their ancestry from that 20 women, at least Indians. So that is how, island was developed. Factors such as language, religion, social practices are the fundamental things that intervened with the construction of the ethnic identities among the PIOs. When we talk of the cultural retention involves the deliberate preservation of the tradition and practices among the PIOs and the youth. Language retention is very important, through which the older generation is helping the younger generation to maintain. For example, French Creole, Hindi is coming up there. Now Hindi is coming up with the help of ICCR and the Indian Cultural Center, which was opened it was opened very recently, I would say 10, 15 years back, right? Food and clothing, yes, there has been a Tamil Sangam which is very active. There is a Tamil parade which happens once in a year, Tamil New Year, which is celebrated. The youth are promoted to wear the traditional clothes. Also, I was fascinated when I went on to see a few things like ananas, that's basically pineapple. So they sell pineapple as ananas only, they don't call it pineapple, which is very amazing. Chai, they don't call it tea, they call it chai. You go to a very upscale cafe or you go to a roadside dhaba, they'll call chai a chai, which is again a very good thing. And then of course jalebi. So jalebi remains jalebi. So that these are the small things I just want to do because I did an empirical research. The culture is dynamic. The culture has many other nuances. So Indians adopted French identity, that I must say, but were able to maintain a hybrid identity as well. So as I told you, they claim themselves to be basically socially Catholic and privately Hindu because of all of the French assimilation policy. Now the impact of globalization on ethnic identity, if we say, so of course globalization helps in fostering the cross-culture interaction and reshapes the ethnic identity through shared experiences. And the youth comes into it. Global media influence has been too much. The youth, they do try to, as somebody said in the previous presentation, that when he asked him whether you are X or you are Y, so he preferred to say X rather than saying Y. I would not go into the details, right? But again, in the reunion, the same thing happens, that if you ask him, do you carry some Indian identity? So youth would be a bit hesitant to say, especially the French, no, we are not, we are completely French now. So global media influence has impacted them very heavily, and then of course the cosmopolitan nature of the world coming up. So here the main challenge is integration of youth into the cultural and the societal aspect, integrating them into this cross-cultural scenario. And then it can be done through many ways. One is more social programs by our elders, which of course they are taking care of. NGO government collaboration and academia, that is very important. So for youth as a heritage resource, we can say that they can come into the political engagement, representation and activism. Recently, we do had a mayorship of the Indian origin. Political representation has increased. We also had a university rector, which is quite a powerful position in the island, and some civil services where Indians has coming up, but still yet many to do. Quality education, yes, it's very important. Language barriers should be removed. The youth should be trained to even have a good link with other part of the world, not only the French. Tamil Sangam can play a very important and organized role with Draupadi Durga Mandir Temple Association is trying to recover the Indian identity, lost Indian identity. Educational programs should come up more collaborative with Indian universities, social activities and festivals. I'll just go to the conclusion part due to the paucity of time. So to conclude, I would say it's important for India to connect with the youth in the island through various institution policy initiative. Media, social media, internet could be one major tool for the connect. As again in the inaugural, Professor Dubey said that internet has diluted the borders. So I think that would help us in achieving this, because they are our brothers and sisters who have lost connect with India completely. Hybrid identity should be accepted as a new cultural identity, at the same time utilize it as India's social capital in Réunion and France. So through soft power diplomacy, such as education and films, we can do well over there. Yesterday only I was talking with Dr. Anil. He told me that we also have a good connection with Greece. So I was thinking that yes, that might be the same reason why we lost Greece and PIOs in the Greece and PIOs in the Reunion, that we don't have a connect. Maybe through education and films we can connect. Last but not the least, getting visa to the island, even for an Indian, is a big challenge. You don't need a Schengen visa to reach out there. You need a special permission from France to reach out there. As I told you, it's a closed island. No research is allowed. No census is allowed. So it's very difficult. Even when I landed, I was held by the police for 2 hours. So they checked me through in and out that I'm not there to disturb the peace, and then only they could allow me. So visa is a big challenge. Air connectivity is a big challenge. That can be, you have only one flight going once a week from Chennai, Air Austral. So to communicate with the youth, to connect with the youth, and to have this connectivity, connection, and communication, 3 C's with the youth, I think we should come up with some idea, like connection maybe through films, education, more air connectivity. That would help. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anshu. Our last speaker today is Dr. Jayanathan Govender. He is faculty in the School of Social Sciences at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. He facilitates postgraduate studies in industrial organization and labor studies, clinical and applied sociology, and research methodology. His interests are in public policy, inequality studies, and BRIC sociology, amongst other things. His affiliations are the South African Sociological Association, Indian Sociological Society, and International Sociological Association. His latest co-edited book is The Sociology of Inequality in BRICS Countries. Now, Jaya is also my friend and colleague and comrade, and we were in the unions together and in the Natal Indian Congress together, and we go back a number of years, maybe 4 decades or so. And it's a pleasure to introduce him.
The first is youth justice, which I think is a much more bigger thing, that we need to deal with. And for me, it's actually a movement. And I see parts of it, in different parts of the world. The Arab Spring, the Occupy movement, and so on. And young people have made tremendous sort of strides in the political world today. And I think there's some incredible lessons to learn from them. In our own South Africa, where Dasaraj and I come from, young school-going kids in 1976 took on an entire apartheid state, and won against them. But that's the first point, right? But we are not talking about, our political sort of oppressions and all of that. We're speaking about an economic, force which is coming to bear on our young people. And, the sort of looming fourth industrial revolution is where the crisis actually lies. Because the work that I've been doing tells us that the so-called world of work, and in the way in which we understood it, where at least you and I, that is our generation, will cease to exist. That the level of employment will actually decline, if not, more harsher words, like drop, decline, non-existent. And the few jobs that will actually, be in evidence would actually belong in areas like space science, where there's a whole lot of attempts at creating alternative economies beyond just, the planet. So we're moving our economies, our political economies, just beyond the planet itself. So that's that first crisis. The second I want to mention in this unwritten paper is, what have we done for youth development? The truth is we've done quite a bit. But, without me being kind of universalistic and say, the whole world has tried to help our young people, which is not really true, because it doesn't apply, in the South, and in our case, that is. But yet, in terms of policies, each government, has this plethora, of documents about what they want to do for young people and so on. They build in it economic theories, which they, actually apply. So that's the second thing. So a lot has been done. But my argument, and I do that argumentatively in this paper, that, very little, outcome is there, is a kind of return for the kind of investments, both intellectual investment, monetary investment, and public policy investments, right? There's a very simple reason for this, without being too reductionist. The classical theory says, look, the only time we can create jobs, right, be expansionist, is when the economy expands and when there's a greater deal of consumption. Now, we know that theory doesn't work, right? In the face of huge growth, we see greater and deeper inequality in the world. So that theory has been, negated a very, very long time ago. Wealth is still being created, right, but in very, very sort of unequal ways. Piketty and other sort of economists actually talk about this. So once I've done this kind of overview, I, sort of slightly move away. I drift away from what sociologists do and from what Dasraj has taught me, when I was an undergrad and postgrad student. And that is, sociologists don't provide answers. Our jobs are not to provide answers. Our jobs are, well, you're smiling there, at least you're agreeing with me, is to provide the analysis and give, some kind of story as to what's really going on here. But when somebody in the audience says, so what's the answer to all of this? And we say, no, sorry, we are sociologists. We don't have answers for you. So what is my, sort of attempted answer? For me, it's in the realm of theory. It's in the realm of the abstraction, right? You see, because this world of employment, the so-called world of work, is dominated by northern classical theory, economic theory that is, right? We've actually not paid too much of attention to that and never really critiqued this theoretical foundation, all right, of how jobs are created, of how we absorb our younger people into the economies and so on. So Southern theory has never really applied itself to the plight of our young people. So my perspective comes from the South, and it is saying some very interesting things, right? So I identify in this paper those particular failures in the different realms, right, of the political economy, government intervention, all this foreign direct investment, and all those yada yada stories we hear about all the time that classical economists actually advise us, right? So they've all gone wrong, and they're not working. Now, if we don't do something immediately, then in fact those imminent dangers are approaching us very, very fast. So what am I suggesting here? There's a 20-year-old sort of group of theories which links humanism, this kind of think that we're all people, human beings and all of that, to the ecology, right? An ecologism, which combines the two, right? Look, don't forget something as simple as this, that everything that we, in our lives, the technology that you walk around with, the gold that you carry, wherever around your necks, and the food that you eat, all comes from the environment, right? It's as simple as that. Okay, now if you hold that to be true, right, then we got to actually work from there. So what I'm suggesting is a sort of theoretical perspective that says something like this, that we human beings need to regroup. And therefore, I suggest this sort of reawakening of a theory, which has been around for some time, relationality. It basically focuses on the human side, right, of our interactions. And where is this actually possible? Everywhere, actually. You look around us, we're cooperating around something. Our entire history is actually based on cooperation. The diaspora itself, you want me to stop? The diaspora itself is based on cooperation, right? So I'm suggesting a sort of vehicle, right, for young people, the so-called movement, which is basically some kind of youth core, which can actually be implemented globally, all over the place. And using the conduits of GOPIO, right, which already is there, set up already, with fantastic sort of global infrastructures, right? And where you harness the sort of capacity capabilities of the state, right? And basically, it's a program, right, for young people in different parts of the world, facilitated by civil society, by groups like ourselves who are trying to do something very, very useful. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your patience.
My name is Siva Palan, and the question is to the new chair. Just now you mentioned about the identity from the family to community and all that, but you didn't mention about the nation. How do the diasporas affiliate with the nation? Because do they identify as a French or British first and then Indian, or do they identify themselves as, what is their affiliation? This is my question.
Thank you, sir, for that question. I had mentioned at one point that in the European Union, and particularly in UK, the identities are hyphenated. And it is British Asian or Asian British is the question that we keep on asking. For the youth themselves, they choose which identity is to be played up or displayed at what arena that they are in. The other thing that comes here, specifically for the European Union countries, is also a contestation of nationalities. I was not able to speak up much, but this is a conflicted field. How does a youth who's perhaps born in one place, transferred to another place in which he grows up or she grows up, and has a family, a community of continuity, of traditions, of cultures, of languages, but the national situation is such that it is from the sub-region to the nation. Sub-region, region, then comes the nation. One example I would like to quote here is perhaps in Germany and in most of the European Union countries, the affiliation to football clubs. So that sort of showcases the identity that you want to show at which level. If you belong to Juventus, say, for example, you will support a particular group. It is assumed that you will support also a particular kind of politics, and your critiques would come in a particular way. The debate comes in when the person involved does not want to do that. They may very well love Juventus, but their political affiliations, their questions would be different. Their choices would be different. Another example would be in this contestation of nationalities and ideologies. Do they see themselves as Germans? Then comes the question, how German are you? Or how Indian are you? The understanding of the youth of such hyphenated and hybrid identities is also that at all times there is always a question. That is why one of the slides I had shown, who am I? Am I fully Indian because of my heritage? Am I fully German, French, Czechoslovakian, any place that I grew up in which I have a formal nationality, of which I hold a passport? Is it that which is holding? My focus was entirely on the cultural aspects. How do we culturally express ourselves? And because culture also creates the base on which my national understandings will be built upon me, most hybrid identities are therefore very comfortable with projecting themselves as both of the culture and of the nation. So the nation in some ways comes first at times, but the concept of morality or ethics, for example, the Ukrainian war, has created a lot of debate online. Why is any country taking any particular kind of position? Why should we not align, or why should we align? So these debates are ongoing, and the identities are also being constructed. What it does is create complexes and much more difficult transitions to adulthood. What would I be some 5-10 years afterwards in my working life? How would I project myself? Would I donate to my community in the same way that I have seen my family do? Would I still be associated with it, or would I move away? The conflict also comes within the families when choices are divergent. So, by one of the slides that said convergences, divergences, and negotiations, the techniques that I used. Thank you so much for the question. Race is a very interesting and important connotation here. The difference with Indian diaspora is that the race question really does not come in as black and white. It comes as being an Indian of color, brown, somewhere between, neither white nor black. And then the youth generally display, that is why I had used the expressions of music. Rap artists, for example, are very much preferred at times and not so preferred at times. Some of the rap artists, for example, though he's not classified as rap per se, but the Rastafari movement of the Caribbeans and the New York area, that resonated. That still resonates. They create role models from artists themselves. Bollywood song and dance interruptions in the narrative of a film, though it may be visible as interruptions, but in reality, they are spaces through which the youth is reconstructing their own identities. Some little aspect, a little gesture, is enough to make that you think that, okay, I too would want to do this. So somewhere, identities are being aligned also. Thank you. Sir, from behind.
Thank you. I would like to ask a small question from Dr. Vasu. Sorry, I don't, on Réunion Island?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm from Mauritius. Réunion Island is our sister island. So we know a little bit on it, please. My question is there a tendency for the PIOs in the island to increase little or stable or fall down? Okay. The number of PIOs in that island, does it have a tendency in number to grow or to fall down or to remain stable?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Yes, the tendency is to grow because when I was there in 2016-2017, I met few families who have resettled on the island from Puducherry. Yes. So when the French left, as you know, they gave the option when they left Puducherry. So they gave option whether to be a French or to stay back in Puducherry, or you can go to Reunion Island later. So I met around 5 of the family members who came from Puducherry, and they have settled down there well. Also, I met the imam, the clerk of the mosque, who had very recently, I mean, it was a year and a half when he had settled down there. with his family. And as I tell that Bohra Muslims, they are coming at a large number. So yes, the tendency is to increase because the French government, they pay more, 1.8 times more if you are working in the French government and the Reunion Island. I mean, if you are in the Paris, you get 1.8 times less, and here you get it more. So it's like that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would just like to add a little. You know, there are so many Sri Lankans who are getting asylum there.
Yes, but my presentation was on PIOs.
No. I'm just telling you how the PIOs will increase.
Yes, yes.
So even the Sri Lankans,
Yeah.
those who are from Indian origin,
Yes.
they are going there.
Yeah.
And just like a joke, on myself, my son is settled there. So he is going to increase at least by one.
Oh, then you were testing my knowledge, huh?
No,
okay,
no.
Thank you for that. Excellent.
So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank
Please.
Any other questions, please? Keeping in mind that we need to finish the panel in the next 2-3 minutes, please.
I'm not presenting myself because I have already shared my view in the previous session. So just some observation and comments, and specifically on Aditya's paper, because my wife has also worked on Reunion Island, and her PhD title was Socio-Cultural Formation of Indian Diaspora in Reunion Island, and I have also visited there. So what I have noted कि there are various PIO organizations who is working there, and they are doing well. With regard to, because this particular island is still held by French, and French identity is very visible, and because French, they have brutally crushed the entire local culture. If you compare the British versus French in terms of colony, so French were more brutal. Because I have worked on Indian diaspora in Malaysia, means mostly Tamilians. In Reunion Island, most of the Indian diaspora belongs to the Tamil community. Because I believe that Tamils are very assertive in terms of their linguistic identity, but over there in Reunion Island, most of these people, they have forgotten their linguistic identity. They are finding it difficult to speak their language. So in terms of language of Reunion Island, most of these people are speaking French, Creole, no put of local or Tamil language are there. So these observations I have noted. On the other, most of these people of Indian origin, they are very hardcore believers of, they still carry the first world aura in terms of their identity. They always aligned with France, not with India. So in terms of hospitality, the warmness, if you visited Mauritius, so Mauritian, because sir has mentioned our sister island. So Mauritian, because of the British identity towards the end, so these people are more warm towards the Indian, but these people of Indian origin of Reunion Island, they are not at all warm to the Indians or the other. They carry the superiority complex over there. This is, I noted over there.
Yes, thank you for the observation. Yes, you are correct in terms of, but you know, I believe in humanity and equality, so I wouldn't say this, but yes, you are absolutely correct. And most important thing, money is honey. So they are not leaving France anytime soon. The only reason is this. And of course, you know, the French idea of multiculturalism combined with assimilation policy, yes, their language, food, clothing, everything has been destroyed. But now government is trying to revive. We have a Hindi center there. Then you have a Bharatnatyam center there in the Indian center there. So they are trying to promote it. And also many mandir associations, temple associations are coming up. Urdu is getting revived. So yes, thank you.
I would only like to add a few words. There is a revival, maybe because of the harm they have caused to the Indian community there. That's true, they have been suppressed. They had to pray in the forest, as you mentioned, in the backyard. And I have proof that the Saint Denis capital has initiated Tamil schools during breaks. They are not allowed that freedom we have in Mauritius, but during breaks they have that Tamil lessons. And well, some of the people are trying to reconnect with their ancient, rich culture.
Thank you. Thank you.
As there are no other questions, thank you all for being present. First, I would like to thank all the panelists. Thank you for your erudite and very learned and extensive presentations. Thank you, audience, for being a lovely audience and for your questions.